Alright, so y'all should have finished up 121. It's due today. But I should have probably told y'all this earlier. The importance of 121. Or you should be looking ahead. I highly recommend you look ahead. Work early. Again, I think how this class is supposed to be taught is have you guys come to class, pull out your laptops, and start working immediately. If you have any help or need ask any questions, but basically you should be working on this all on your own. Well, that's how I think this class is meant to be taught. But 1, 2, 2. In this activity, you're going to enhance your previous activity code. And this one is extremely long. Which is supposed to be done by tomorrow. I'm kind of behind. Luckily, I looked ahead. Also, so we have activities. Activities are our normal homeworks. Then we have a project. So we have 4 activities. And then we have our project. So last time in lesson 1-1, we had 8 homeworks and 1 project. In 1-2, we only have 4 homework. 1 and 2 build off of each other. Then we have a project. Let me look up my... Maybe I was wrong. Oh. So once we get to 1-1-2 or 1-2, so we have 1-1 and 1-2. 1-2 has 1-2-1, 1-2-2, 1-2-3, 1-2-4 activities. Then we have a project. After our project, guess what we're going to do? An even bigger project. And it's so big, they just named it a problem. I highly recommend you look ahead and be planning ahead. So our project, so it's going to be back-to-back 2 major projects. One's the actual project, one's the problem. The project for this unit is going to be building a game. Be thinking about a game. I highly recommend you be thinking about it the entire time. And then looking at the project, so the entire lesson 1.3 is just one thing. What does it even say? This is where you'll actually be trying to solve a... Oh, it's cool. It's supposed to be team-based too. Yeah, we're going to have to work something out between you and Buck. Because an important thing about programming is being able to work in a team. And sometimes, especially during the pandemic, you have to work with a team member that is remote. Well, this is how it's set up. We have problems. Problems are usually difficult and require teamwork. Oh. So, to answer your question about global you had yesterday, so global, Python, variable. If, basically, let's see if I can see the definition. I looked it up, last night. If you assign a variable anywhere in your code, if you assign to it, Python will assume that it's local. If you only read, it'll assume that it's global. To be on the safe side, use global. Don't be implicit. Implicit global variables, just test your code. Make sure it's actually reading the global variable. So, in today's lesson, or this unit's lesson, we are going to be adding a leaderboard. Because what's the point of the game unless you can brag about your score? In this activity, you enhance Catch a Turtle by adding a leader board to show the top 5 scorers. To do this, you will learn how to transverse strings, manipulate lists, and apply Boolean logic. You will apply other skills that you have learned so far about variables, relational operators, and iteration. Recall the 4 main parts of the game were random appearance of a turtle object on the screen, the event of the turtle object being clicked, the score updating, the timer updating. In order to add a leaderboard to your game, you will need to store the top scores across multiple game sessions. So currently, we've only had it, so when it runs fresh. When it closes, that's it. Now, whenever we close it, we're going to save some information. So the next time we load it back up, we'll get that information back. To do this, you will need to permanently save the score data. Storing the data in a list isn't sufficient, as any data stored in the list is lost once the game ends and the program terminates. Therefore, to permanently save the data, you will need to save the information in a text file that the program can access and manipulate. So the broad requirements: you will add the following functionality to the existing code. Ask for player's name before starting the game. Once time is up, check to see if the player is eligible for the leadership board. This includes multiple steps. First, you're going to load the current leaderboard data from a text file. Compare the score to the scores in the list to see if the player has a score that is greater than or equal to the existing leader scores. If it is, insert the player's name and score into the leaderboard list in the right position. Save the data from the new leaderboard list to the leaderboard text file, replacing the previous text file contents, and then display the leaderboard data at the end of the screen. So, updating Catch a Turtle code. The instructions below will guide you through the steps to add the leaderboard to existing game. Open your completed Catch a Turtle program from the previous activity. If you do not have a fully functioning game, refer to your teacher for instructions on how to get a copy of the completed solution. So after y'all submit it, I'm going to go through and tell you if there's any errors or anything that need to be changed. So I recommend doing some sort of flowchart. It doesn't have to be a exact flowchart. Just draw boxes and think about the path. When you start programming a lot, you really start thinking in branches and where everything's going. So when you have So that's kind of multi-threaded. Like in the so what was it called? It was on timer, right? Was the name of it? What was the name of that code? Actually, I got that. Yeah, on timer. So when you call on timer, I don't know if you know this, but we're able to execute multiple programs and instructions not quite at the same time. But programs don't have to be sequential. Like for example, I'm running Paint at the same time I'm running Chrome. So what is way down in the operating system handles this? It'll run some of the instructions for Chrome. It'll run some of the instructions for Paint. You can have multiple threads being executed. They're called threads. When you call on timer, so when you call on timer, what you can imagine happens is that a new thread, another new sequential code is going to be executed. So we have our normal code. So this will launch a new thread after so many milliseconds. And then this is going to be executed at the same time this is executed. You can think of it happening at the same time, not perfectly matched up. They can occur at any time. What ends up happening is when you call on timer, and 1,000 or 1 second later, this function is going to be randomly executed. You will be placing functions for the leadership board in a separate file and importing those functions. So you're going to be creating a leaderboard module. This will be your first module. I've already gone over and explained how modules work. You will need to make sure all the files used in this activity are in the same folder. So in the import section, add the following line to import the leaderboard module. Remember that when you call something, when you import something, what this code does first is it looks for a file called leaderboard.py. And then we give it a nickname. So in this game, in the game configuration, just before initializing turtle objects, initialize variables necessary to create the leaderboard functionality. The pseudocode is provided for you. So again, this arrow means assign this value to this in pseudocode. They don't use equal signs. So save this text to this variable. Create an empty list. If you've never seen an empty list, I think y'all have it. So an empty list is just like it says. So brackets indicate a list. An empty list has nothing in it. Another empty list for scores, and then a variable for player name. You can check your work here. Something like this. I again haven't created a file, but you'll need to tell me what each, in your own words, what each variable is used for. Why is it better user-centered design to place the input statement asking for the username before the turtles are initialized? Why do you think it'd be better to do it before you initialize the turtle? It is preferred to add the input statement before creating the turtle object because once the turtle objects are created, the turtle screen launches, shifting the user's focus and possibly causing the user to completely miss the input statements. So I didn't take off for this for your program. But when I was running y'all's project, all of a sudden it stopped painting. I had no clue why it stopped painting. All I know is your program stopped and it looked horrible. Because it was only partially rendered. I did not know. There was no indication on screen. Go check the terminal to input the number of clouds or birds or cars or whatever. There was no indication to me. There was no message popping up. Go check terminal and input that. So whenever I run some code, I don't want it to pop up a screen and then have a blank screen that does nothing. Right? You want it to, as soon as I run it, as soon as I run the code, so here is what this is a statement that calls running the code. I want it to immediately ask me for information so I can type it here. Once I type it here, then it'll launch. So in future, unless you visually write on the screen, go check terminal. I'm going to assume your game just froze or done something. So any input you want to get, make sure you get it at the very beginning or add some indication to the screen. Because remember the one deal where at the very end, you were required to ensure that the game didn't break, turn all the turtles in that colliding code to some color to indicate that the game is finished or the collision is finished. Add the following function to your code. Again, this is going to be in a new module you're creating. Make sure it is placed before the event section in your, hold on. This is, this supposed to be, let me check. Now this is this is supposed to be in your main file. Add the following function to your code. Make sure it is placed before the event section. So where your functions. So why do the variables preceded by the keyword global? Why are we putting global before these? Yes, because they're global variables, and we're also going to be editing them. Notice here they also include spot as a global, because you're technically manipulating it. You should have your spot variable as a global if you didn't do it. Note, you can also have to put them all on the same line. You can actually spread them out into multiple lines. This global tells that the program that these variables are the same ones that we already defined in the main program. This is referred to as a scope of a variable. So scope can either be global or local to a function. Note that this code uses the name spot as the main turtle. You should replace it to wherever you named your turtle. In the countdown function, add the following call to the end of the if statement. So after time is up, you'll call manage leadership board. To save yourself time while testing the new code, change timer variable to from 30 seconds to 5 seconds so that you can test it more quickly. Didn't you have work yesterday? So again, so for the first portion, I don't know how I'm gonna have y'all guys do this because you need to be submitting 3 files at a time, and I really don't want to. Almost want y'all to upload the files, but I like y'all's ability to change it last minute too. Because once you upload a zip file, you can't change it. I guess you could technically go over there, delete it, and then re-upload it. I'm probably going to have different versions. So I'll have a leadership version 0 and another. Because I like the ability to go in and add comments to it. So let's look at managed leadership boards. So leaders board. So again, you're going to have a module that you nicknamed LB. It's going to call load. It's going to update. Call a function called update, and it's going to call a function called draw leaderboard. So let's look at the functions that you're required to create. This load leaderboard takes in a file name, a list of names, a list of scores. So that loads it up. Then we have, this is unfinished, it says to do. If length of scores is less than 5, what does this statement mean? Scores 4. So the list of scores, and what does this bracket 4 mean? And what does 4 correspond to? The last. So the list is 5 long. Now, what if your list is not 5 long and you try to? What if you tried to access the 4th element in an empty list? What would happen? Error. Why doesn't this go error though? Because this is a trick in computer programming. So for example, this line is executed, and it sees an R statement. So again, R I think can be written like this in C++, but you can have R like that. In computer programming, a lot of languages do something known as lazy execution of conditionals. So let me write this out. So if you have if true are 5 divided by 0. You can't divide by 0. That's an error. If you try typing in a calculator, it'll give you an error. If you try typing it in a program, it'll throw an error too and crash your program. You can't divide by 0. However, this is not necessarily true because the computers sometimes have some detection in this. It'll pop up and say, oh, you can't divide by 0. I'm going to throw an error early for you. But when it comes up to true, and it sees R, what most computers do, programs do, most program languages will not look at the R statement. Because if this is true, do we need to know what the R statement is? No, because we know it's true. And so what most program languages do is if they see a true and an R statement, they will ignore this line of code. Likewise, if we have an AND statement and this is false, regardless of whether or not this is true or false, we know this entire line is going to be false, right? Because in order for you to have for this if statement to execute, you need a true and a true. So if the first one is false, it does not matter what the other one is. Likewise, if we're using an R statement, if we're having an R statement, it doesn't matter what the second one is. This isn't true for all programming languages. This is kind of bad practice to do this. What would be better is if you had, we instead had broken this up. What would have been better is if you did an elif and did this. And, but here's the thing: is that means I have to copy this code. And we also don't like copying code whenever we can repeat it. So a lot of programmers will rely on lazy execution, even though this normally would be an error if the list is 5. But again, if this is true, this is never executed. So again, load is going to take a file name, a list of name variable, and a score list variable. If the score list, so it's going to load it in, it's going to populate these variables, and then we have another function that's going to update it. Again, we now pass in the same variables, but now we pass in a player name and score. And then it's going to have a function to draw the leaderboard. And it has some variable true and some variable false. What do you think this true and false represent? So if the score is less than if the number of players is less than 5 on the leadership board, or if your new score is better than one of the players, so basically it's saying display it with your new name. So it basically means this true is telling you that you were added to the leadership board, right? And false if you weren't. It's just displaying the old one. We'll see in a little bit what precisely that means. So far in this course, you have implemented Python modules such as, or you have imported modules such as turtle and random to enhance your code. Using import modules is one way to abstract code. So abstract is a very common concept in computer science and information technology, meaning that a lot of detail of a system or a process is hidden, allowing the user to focus, and the user would be the programmer, to focus on details that are important to the task at hand. So it's a way of hiding how code works. You simply use the functions to find the module without actually knowing how they work. All the details are hidden or abstracted from you. So data abstraction manages complexity in a program in the following ways. It provides a separation between the abstract properties of a data type and the concrete details of its representation. You don't need to know how string works, only how to use a string. You don't really need to know how a list is managed in the program. Just the basic properties like remove, get the 5th element, and so on. It can manage complexity by giving a collection of data a name without representing the specific details of the representation. Data abstractions can be created using lists. Developing a data abstraction to implement in a program can result in a program that's easier to develop and maintain, and often contains different types of elements. In this section, you will work with your own custom module specific to leaderboard functionality. You will do this by replacing the functions in another file. The import statement you added earlier will make these functions available within Turtle code. So create a new Python file called leaderboard.py and save it in the same folder where your game code currently resides. So here you're going to copy again and make a new version of it for 122. Yeah. So do your catch a turtle and make a new file for this folder. Just copy your last one and copy it over. It gives you some starting code for the leaderboard.py. So here's the load. Here's the update. Here's the draw. So copy this to your leaderboard.py and go up here. I'm probably not gonna have you submit this yet because all you did was copy and paste. There's no reason. I'm assuming you can copy and paste. Oh yes. I also highly recommend that you change the comment style. This is how I comment. So loads leaderboard from file, and then I do file name, name of file, leader names, list of leaderboard names. Basically, I also add comments for all the variables so that I can look at this one block and see. List of scores for each layer and leader names. I usually have this comment go all the way across the screen. And then I also will come over here and usually do this so that it's format looking nice. This is how I comment functions. So this style of comments is how I personally comment. I'll always describe the variables being passed into it. I give a description. So the function leadership loads leaderboard from a file. And let me go ahead and do the code word. There's the code word. So let's go over all these functions. What do they do? So leader file does something called open, and it's passed in a file name. Need to create. So this says you need to create the file ahead of time in the same folder. So this doesn't create a file. It actually has an open one that's already created. if you read back over here, it tells you to go ahead and create a file called a122 underscore leaderboard.txt. So you have to create this file first. Here we're opening it up. And then for each line in the leaderboard file, so when you open this up, what it returns is a list of lines, of strings. So it does one string for each line. Then we're going to use a while loop to read the leaderboard name from the list, add the leaderboard name to the list, read the player score using a similar loop, add the player score to the list, and so on. At the very end, we have to close the file. Again, you'll be implementing this. Update. Updates leaderboard by inserting current player and score. So we'll be looping and seeing if the score can be put in. Insert the new player and score at proper appropriate position. We'll go into how to insert into a list. Keep both lists at 5 elements only, so we're only going to be looking at the top 5 players right now. And then we need to write that file back. You might have noticed when we first opened the file, we passed an R. What do you think the R stands for? So what were we doing in this function? So we're opening the file and doing what with it? Reading it one line at a time, right? So what this does is open it up as read only. That's what the R stands for. Is you opening up to read from it. So this function, update, this opens the file and erases its contents. So write W is write only. So you can only write to the file you open. You actually have to, whenever you open file, you have to pass it in. There is a RW, which is read and write, but we'll be just using R and W. It's very complex how opening and doing file reading on a computer works internally. Because you have to remember, this is just a stick of RAM and a hard drive, and then a little processor that can only really do addition and subtraction. I don't know if you know, it can also do multiplication and other things. But a computer really is. It's just a string of zeros and ones in the RAM. You have also a hard drive where you can save stuff to disk. And then you have a little CPU that all the CPU does add, subtract, and that's almost it. And all you're doing is adding, going to different places. It could do a few more things like go to. It can do XR. I can do like R and AND statements. But overall, it's very simple. It also has conditionals, like you can check to see if something's 0. But CPU is very stupid. Like it can only do like a few things. You have to actually program and all this. Drawing the leadership board. Mostly filled out except for here. You display a message, you get bronze, you get silver, you get gold. If you get first place, give them a gold medal. So it says save another version of your code. I'll create this later and be thinking about it. How I want y'all to submit. But I think that'll be it for today. We'll continue this more tomorrow. I'm just looking at the project right now. Project says your game should represent algorithmic thinking, allow for user input, color and movement is the basic requirements. Must use list indexing, manipulation of strings, respond to events such as clicking or moving. Like me, you might have an arrow key to make you move left. Reduce duplication by using functions. And again, we're going to go through the same process. Brainstorm all the ideas. Evaluate them. Choose one idea to fully develop. Plan. Design. Create and test. Document your progress. For example, this is what one person did. So he created a turtle, able to move it around and follow a maze. Turtle is kind of somewhat slow. Yeah. And if you hit the side of the wall, game stops.